What would you do if you found out your husband was having dinner with another woman at your favorite restaurant? Would you break down? Call him? Confront her? I didn't. I simply booked a table next to theirs. That night I didn't go to fight. I went to see the truth for myself. But what I saw wasn't just cheating. It was something deeper. Something that made me question everything. My marriage, my home, even my identity. She wasn't what I expected. And he wasn't who I thought he was. One dinner turned into the beginning of a story I never asked for, but one I had to finish. Carefully, quietly, strategically. Because sometimes when you sit quietly in the storm you start to see clearly. This isn't a story about revenge. It's a story about discovery. About truth. About the kind of silence that speaks louder than any scream. And by the end of it all, someone walked away in handcuffs. And someone else walked away stronger. Let me take you back to how it all began. With one message, one reservation, and one woman who chose to sit next to betrayal and stare it straight in the face. I was folding laundry when my husband's phone buzzed. I wasn't expecting anything. Just the usual evening routine, sorting through piles of clothes, thinking about dinner, maybe a new podcast to listen to. But when I heard the buzz, something made me glance over. His phone was resting face up on the dresser and a name flashed on the screen. A name I didn't recognize. Tasha. My fingers paused, holding a shirt halfway through the fold. I wasn't the kind of person to snoop, but something in me told me I needed to see more. I set the shirt down and leaned in, pretending to adjust the laundry basket. But my eyes couldn't look away from the screen. The message read, "Can't wait for our special dinner. Same place." My stomach dropped. I'd known about his work meetings, his gym sessions, and the occasional late-night calls, but I didn't know a Tasha. And I certainly didn't know about a special dinner. My mind raced. Tomorrow was our anniversary. I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. He hadn't mentioned anything about it. No flowers. No dinner reservations. No excited plans like he used to make. But now here was this message. "Can't wait for our special dinner." I felt my pulse quicken, the weight of realization sinking in. The words from the message lingered in my mind as I stood frozen. Same place? He had planned a dinner. But not with me. I tried to breathe, to pull myself together. The familiar sound of the shower running from the bathroom was a reminder that he had no idea what I'd just read. But I couldn't let it go. This wasn't a random text, it meant something. It wasn't just about dinner. It was about the quiet shifts in our relationship that I hadn't wanted to see. The phone buzzed again. Another message from Tasha. My hands twitched, but I forced myself not to look. I knew what I had to do next. I calmly folded the shirt in my hands, letting my mind focus on the simple task. I thought about how many anniversaries we'd celebrated, how many dinners we'd shared at our place. The little Italian restaurant we'd discovered early in our marriage. It had always been our spot, with candles and soft music and tiramisu that we'd argue over. It was where I thought we were supposed to be tomorrow night. I stood there folding laundry, keeping my breathing steady, and I smiled. Not because I felt good, but because I'd finally decided something. I wasn't going to let him dictate this anniversary. He hadn't planned anything for me, so I'd plan for myself. My fingers moved quickly over my phone as I made a reservation at that same restaurant. A table for one. One table away. I didn't need to confront him right away. I didn't need to make a scene. This moment would be mine to own. The rest could wait. I set the phone down, knowing that I had made my choice. Tomorrow night I would walk into that restaurant like I always had, calm, composed, and in control. I finished folding the laundry, still smiling to myself. His phone sat on the dresser, buzzing with messages that I knew I wouldn't need to read. It didn't matter. I had my own plans now. And it was going to be a night he'd never forget. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't even feel anger bubbling beneath the surface like I thought I might. Instead, I slipped into my red dress, the one my husband had always told me made me look too much. Too bold. Too attention-grabbing. Too much for the quiet dinners we had, the dinners he clearly wasn't planning on having with me tonight. But tonight it was perfect. The dress clung to me in all the right places, the deep crimson fabric catching the light as I stepped in front of the mirror. I was a woman who had been overlooked. Now I was dressing for myself. And tonight I wasn't just his wife, I was someone else entirely. Someone who didn't need permission to exist in the spotlight. I had planned every detail of this evening in silence. The quiet phone call to the restaurant. The confirmation email. The confirmation of my power. Taking the reins when he thought he had control over our narrative. As I slipped on my heels, the sound of them clicking against the floor felt almost like a battle cry. I wasn't getting dressed for revenge. Not really. I wasn't trying to make a scene or hurt him. I wasn't going to walk into that restaurant and confront him. That wasn't my goal. My goal was to see who he was when he wasn't worried about me. Who was he without the pretense? Without the love he thought he could take for granted? I wasn't playing games. I was observing. Bernie. But there was still a knot in my stomach. A question I couldn't quite shake. How long had this been going on? How many times had I been the last one to know? Had this Tasha been slipping into the spaces I wasn't looking, unnoticed by me? I took one last glance at my reflection, smoothing my hair, and grabbed my bag. The car ride to the restaurant felt long, though it wasn't. The minutes ticked away slowly and I felt like I was in a vacuum, cut off from the world outside. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. There was no one to tell. I was alone in this. When I arrived, the parking lot was surprisingly quiet for a Friday night. I adjusted my dress and checked my makeup in the rearview mirror one more time before stepping out of the car, heels clicking on the pavement. The restaurant's warm glow beckoned me forward. My heart pounded, but my steps were steady. There was no room for hesitation tonight. I walked in, greeted by the host who led me to a table by the window just as I'd requested. My heart skipped a beat. I wasn't sure if it was the anticipation of the night ahead or the adrenaline of doing this for myself. I sat down and set my purse beside me, smoothing the fabric of my dress across my lap. The waiter came by, asking if I wanted a drink. I shook my head, not really in the mood for anything except the quiet thrill of being here. Of watching. I didn't need a drink to numb the emotions. Tonight I needed clarity. And then I saw them. I didn't know who they were at first, but I saw her first. A woman with dark hair, her back turned to me. She was laughing at something he'd just said, that familiar laugh that I hadn't realized I hadn't heard in weeks. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. Her voice was smooth, light, and familiar. A voice that I might have heard before in passing. But her face was something I couldn't quite place, like a forgotten memory floating just beyond my reach. The way she held herself, the way she leaned in toward him, they seemed too comfortable, too natural together. I didn't want to look too closely, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. He was sitting across from her, his eyes gleaming as he said something I couldn't hear. He had the same smile, the same laugh he used to give me. He wasn't being careful with her. There was no hesitation. I shifted in my seat, trying to make myself as invisible as possible, but it was no use. The moment I stepped into this restaurant, I wasn't just a spectator. I was part of their story. I wasn't supposed to be here, but in this quiet, controlled world, I felt like I had every right to be. They hadn't seen me yet, and I didn't plan on being noticed. I wasn't going to be the one to disrupt their evening. Not yet. But I needed to know who she was. Who he was. Who I was in this world where I had been cast into the shadows without even realizing it. I held my breath, watching. And for a moment I wished I could unsee what I had just seen. But it was too late. I'd found them. And they were closer than I thought. She laughed like me. It was the first thing I noticed as I watched her interact with him. Her laughter was warm, light, and genuine, almost like a mirror of my own. The kind of laugh I'd always used to share with him during our quiet, intimate moments. But now, here she was, sitting across from him at the same table where I once sat, laughing as if it belonged to her. The unsettling familiarity of it made my stomach churn. She tilted her head in the same way I did when I was listening to him, when I was trying to understand his jokes, his thoughts, his moods. The subtle movements that were once mine, that I had thought were part of our unique connection, were now being used by someone else. And then she did something I didn't expect. She ordered the same drink I always did. The same red wine. Dry. Bold. The exact drink that had always been my choice when we went out to eat. The waiter didn't even bat an eye when she said it, as though it were routine. It was like I was watching myself from another life, a reflection of the woman I used to be in his presence, but now it was all being taken over by her. I wanted to look away, to make this stop, to pretend it wasn't happening. But I couldn't. My eyes were locked on her, on the way she so naturally embodied everything that used to be me. Then something caught my attention, a small detail that hit me with a sudden wave of realization. She was wearing a wedding ring. It wasn't just any ring. It was his ring, the same one I had worn for years. A gold band that once symbolized the promises he'd made to me. The promises he'd broken with every lie, with every betrayal. I felt my heart sink into my stomach. She had something I didn't expect. She was married to him. I stared at her hand in disbelief, the weight of what I was seeing almost too much to bear. The same wedding band that I had once held proudly on my finger was now on hers. She wasn't just some casual fling. She was his wife too. My mind raced and I found myself trying to process the horror of it. How long had this been going on? How long had I been blind to it all? I didn't make a scene. I made notes. Every word they exchanged, every glance, every touch that lingered just a moment too long. It all went into my mind like a series of coded instructions. I couldn't let myself be consumed by the raw, burning emotions. I needed clarity. I needed facts. I had to know the truth. She laughed again and my pulse quickened. This time it was less of a natural sound and more a practiced one, like she was playing a part she knew all too well. I watched them closely, taking in the way his hand rested too comfortably on her wrist, the way she looked at him, eyes bright, but with something far too familiar about it. I leaned back in my chair, pretending to sip my wine, but my thoughts were racing. Had they been seeing each other longer than I thought? The thought made my blood run cold, but I couldn't turn away from the undeniable evidence unfolding before me. I glanced at the waiter. He'd served them both as though they were regulars, like they were his regulars. This wasn't the first time they had been here. No. This was part of a routine. The ease with which they interacted, the shared smiles, the way he ordered her meal like he knew exactly what she would want. They had done this before. Many times. The knot in my stomach tightened. They weren't meeting for the first time. They had a routine. A routine that had been running behind my back for God knows how long. I stayed at the table long after they finished, pretending to check my phone, watching them with narrowed eyes. He stood up first, giving her a kiss on the cheek. A brief, casual touch that sent a cold shiver down my spine. She waved him off as he walked toward the door. Then she lingered for a few moments longer, finishing her drink slowly. I had to know where she went next. When she finally stood up and slipped out the door, I followed, keeping a safe distance, making sure she wouldn't notice me. I knew I couldn't confront her. Not yet. Not with only pieces of the puzzle. I had to understand how deep this went, how far his lies stretched. She walked briskly, her heels clicking against the pavement in a rhythmic pattern. I followed her down the street, heart pounding in my chest. The anticipation made every second feel like an eternity. Where was she going? What was the next stop in this twisted double life of his? As I watched her turn the corner, I prepared myself for whatever came next. But I wasn't prepared for what I found. She stopped in front of a building, and my heart skipped a beat when I saw the familiar facade of the place. The door clicked open with a small buzz and she stepped inside without a second glance. I waited. I watched. When I was sure the coast was clear, I crossed the street, my feet dragging me toward that same door. Something was tugging at my mind, a feeling of wrongness I couldn't shake. I couldn't let her disappear into the night without knowing more. Without understanding where this secret life of his had been hidden. I waited for a moment before pulling the door open and slipping inside. The hallway was dimly lit, quiet, with nothing but the soft hum of a distant elevator. I felt a cold chill run through me. Something told me that what I was about to find would be far worse than I could have ever imagined. I walked carefully down the narrow hallway, my heart thudding in my chest as I reached the door she had entered. It was slightly ajar and I held my breath as I slowly pushed it open. I expected to find a small, hidden apartment, maybe a room full of forgotten memories, evidence of his second life. But what I found was far more chilling than that. I stepped into the apartment and took in the space. It wasn't just any apartment. It was meticulously clean with expensive furniture, photos of her with him on the walls, and a bed that looked far too familiar. This wasn't just an affair. This wasn't some side piece. This was his second life. And I realized in that moment that I had been living in the dark for far too long. I knocked on the door. At first, I thought my hand might freeze before it even made contact with the wood. My heart was thundering in my chest, every pulse feeling like it was echoing through the empty hallway. But I steadied myself, held my breath, and knocked again. The door creaked open a moment later. She stood there, her eyes wide with surprise. The shock was instant. Her face paled as she took in my presence. I could see the gears turning in her mind, the confusion flashing behind her eyes. She wasn't prepared for this. And neither was I. I smiled, trying to mask the storm of emotions swirling inside me. I think we have a man in common. Her lips parted, but no words came out at first. She stared at me like she didn't understand, her mind struggling to process the reality of the situation. Her grip tightened on the door, but she didn't try to shut it. He just stared. I'm sorry, she stammered, her voice shaky. Who are you? I'm his wife, I said, the words slipping out before I even realized I'd said them. There was a brief silence as she processed it. Then finally her face shifted into a smile, though it seemed forced, as if she was trying to convince herself she wasn't being deceived. Oh no. No, I don't think you are. She shook her head, her voice growing more confident now. He would have told me. He did, I replied, my tone cold but steady. He told me he was seeing someone else. And I found you. Her eyes widened, but I didn't let her speak. I wasn't about to give her a chance to explain. Not yet. Not when I had so much of the story still hidden beneath the surface. I pushed past the threshold, stepping into the apartment. The small, tidy space seemed even more suffocating in the silence. The pictures on the walls made my stomach twist. The smiling couple in a wedding photo, a man and a woman I didn't recognize. They looked so happy. But something about the woman caught my eye. Her wedding dress was different. I froze. It was a different dress, a different moment, but the man in the photo was the same. The same man who had pledged his life to me, who had promised me forever. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear the photo from the wall, but I couldn't. I turned to face her, my heart racing as I saw the guilt slip across her face. She wasn't meeting my eyes now. That's our wedding photo, I said, my voice low and steady, the realization dawning on me as my fingers traced the edge of the frame. But you're not wearing the same dress as I did. She looked at the photo, her breath hitching in her throat. Her lips parted as if she were about to say something, but then her words faltered. It's not, she started to explain, but she didn't get the chance to finish. I didn't give her a chance to talk. I stepped closer, closer to the truth, closer to the man who had lied to both of us. You thought you were his only wife, didn't you? Her lips trembled and her eyes glistened with unshed tears. She didn't respond at first, her gaze flickering away from mine. I knew what she wanted to say. She wanted to believe it wasn't true. She wanted to cling to the lie that he had told her, that she was special, that she had somehow earned his love. But the truth was far worse. Just tell me, I said, my voice softening, how long have you been with him? But before she could answer, a child's voice called out from inside the apartment. Mommy? Is Daddy home yet? The voice was small, innocent. And it shattered everything. My blood ran cold. She looked at me, her face paling. I need to go see him, she muttered, turning quickly toward the hallway. No, I said, my voice rising with the sudden weight of the realization. Who is that? Who is the child? Her face twisted with fear and she froze. For a moment there was silence. Her eyes darted back to me, guilt written across her features. That's his son, she whispered, barely able to make eye contact. I stumbled back, my heart thundering in my chest. His son. That was when I realized just how deep the deception went. We didn't speak for 3 days. After the door closed and I left her apartment, my ears still echoed with that child's voice. Mommy? Is Daddy home yet? The words clung to me like smoke. Heavy. Lingering. Refusing to let me breathe. But she texted first. We need to talk. Just us. I stared at it for a while. Then I typed back. I know a place. Neutral ground. We met at a quiet cafe across town, where the noise of blenders and spoons kept our silence company. She looked different, like she hadn't slept, like truth had aged her. I knew because I looked the same. We didn't talk about him at first. We talked about the little things. The red dress. The dinner. The phone messages. The night shifts that didn't exist. The lies that overlapped like fabric. Then she pulled out a notebook from her bag. She had been keeping a timeline. Look, she whispered, sliding it across the table. Dates. Trips. Excuses. I stared at it. He had said he was traveling for work. He thought he was visiting his mother. Thought he was homesick. Turns out he was rotating between lives. We plan a dinner, she said suddenly. I blinked. What? A dinner. All of us. One table. 3 chairs. The idea scared me. Not because I didn't want the truth, but because I wasn't sure I was ready to hear it in stereo. So I nodded. He won't see it coming. We picked the same restaurant from the first message. The special dinner spot. She made the reservation under a different name. We arrived early. She wore navy. I wore red again. Not for him. For closure. When he walked in, his face did something strange. It didn't just drop. It rearranged. Like his entire double life crumbled in slow motion. He stood frozen in place. Sit, she said calmly, motioning to the empty chair between us. He glanced around, maybe thinking someone else would appear and explain it all away. Now, I said. He sat. For a moment none of us spoke. The restaurant buzzed around us, but we were in a different world. Do you want to explain, she began, or shall we? He swallowed hard. What is this? A dinner, I said. One you forgot to plan for. He looked between us. You both of you. We know, she cut in. Everything. His eyes darted toward the exits. Then the waiter came with water and he composed himself. Fine, he muttered. You want the truth? We nodded. I didn't mean for this to happen. I thought I could manage it. You, he looked at me, were comfort. And you, his eyes flicked to her, were challenge. You were both necessary. Necessary? I asked. Don't make this harder than it already is. She scoffed. You lied to us for how long? And now we're making it harder. He took a deep breath, then leaned forward. I was going to end it. With one of you. I just hadn't decided yet. That's when she reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. A copy of the wedding certificate. Her wedding certificate. With a date barely a year after mine. You married us both. He froze. You made a choice a long time ago, I whispered. To live 2 lives. He looked at both of us and for once he had no words. We didn't yell. We didn't cry. We let him sit in the tension he created. Then she stood. You don't need to choose anymore. We already did. I stood too. He tried to speak. Maybe explain. Maybe twist it again. But the spell was broken. We left him there sitting between 2 empty chairs. 3 meals were never ordered. Only the truth was served. I didn't lose a man. I lost a lie. And in its place I found something else. Myself. The walk out of that restaurant felt like a funeral and a rebirth at the same time. He didn't chase us. Maybe he couldn't. Maybe he knew we had seen too much, endured too much, become too much. The other woman, no, not the other anymore, walked beside me in silence. Her name was Lena. I didn't know it before. Funny how you can know someone's heartbreak before you know their name. Outside, the city lights blinked like stars trying to guide us home. We turned to each other at the corner. Well, she said. Well, I echoed. There were no angry words. No blame games. Just a long, steady look between 2 women who had been living inside a shadow. We survived him, I whispered. She let out a soft laugh. We really did. That night I didn't go home. Not to the house where he had laughed and lied and left pieces of himself in drawers and closets. I checked into a hotel. One night. Clean sheets. My name only. And I slept. Not the restless sleep of a woman wondering where he was, but the deep, dreamless sleep of a woman who no longer had to wonder. The next morning I woke to sunlight pouring through the blinds. And something else. Peace. It was quiet. No phone buzzing. No fake conference calls. No excuses to decode. Just me. My breath. And space. I went back to the house. Packed a single bag. Not out of rage. Out of release. I left the red dress hanging in the closet. He could see it every day and remember. Not what I wore but what I became. I called Lena later that week. Just to check in. She answered on the second ring. "I've been meaning to call you," she said. We met again. No tension. Just two women who'd been through fire and didn't let it burn them down. She showed me pictures of her daughter. The little girl with his eyes and her curls. My heart clenched, but not from jealousy. From clarity. That little girl deserved truth too. "I don't know what I'll tell her when she's older," Lena said softly. "You'll tell her the truth," I said. "But you'll also tell her how strong her mother was. We weren't enemies anymore. We were survivors. Wives turned warriors." She was filing for annulment. I was filing for divorce. Different endings. Same beginning. Shared strife. Weeks passed. I reclaimed things in pieces. My favorite mug. My playlist. My laughter. One night I stood in front of the mirror. No mascara. No earrings. No distractions. Just me. And I looked into my own eyes like I was meeting myself for the first time. I saw someone who didn't settle. Who didn't shatter. Who didn't stay small to keep a secret breathing. I saw someone who walked into betrayal and walked out whole. I saw the strongest woman I'd ever met. Me. And I smiled. Because next time he picks a table, he'll sit alone. The end. Please, if you enjoyed the story, please comment where you are watching from and don't forget to subscribe for more intense drama.